Welcome into Fantasy Baseball today, and welcome to March. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by a very special guest, Jeff Zimmerman. How's everything going, Jeff?
It's going good. It's just getting baseball season. It's got the labor auctions this weekend. TGFBI starts next week, Monday. It's just going to be pretty much constant drafting news for the next month, and then its season starts. It's like 7 months of craziness. Just pretty much starts right about now.
Crazy is a good word, Jeff, because here we are. It's March. We've got spring training baseball in full swing. By the time this is coming out, you might have learned about more injuries. It feels like every day we're getting more and more. So we had to find ways to finagle that, obviously, in fantasy baseball. And then we've got all these drafts coming up. Actually, later on today, when this is coming out, I've got NL Labor. So looking forward to that. We've got TGFBI coming up and a whole bunch of Tout Wars drafts coming up in March and NFBC leagues and all that kind of fun stuff. Jeff, we have you on today because we want to talk about your award-winning book, The Process, co-author of The Process. You can also read his work over on Fangraphs. You can listen to him on the Launch Angle podcast. Make sure to follow Jeff on X at Jeff W. Zimmerman and on Blue Sky at jeffwzimmerman.bsky.social. And congrats on winning the FSWA award for Best Baseball Publication. Perfect timing. We're having you on to talk about this book, and you just won an award. So there you go.
Yeah, I had no idea when they were going to announce, and I didn't even know if we were going to win either. So it was one of those deals where it was like, well, we might know before we potted, might not, could have happened in the middle of it. Who knows? But it's been a labor of love more than anything else. But it's nice to be awarded for the hard work that Tanner, myself, and all the other writers have put into it.
Yeah, and reading through this book, I can attest there is a lot of work that goes into it, a lot of research, and you ask people around the industry and you hear them talk about this specific book, The Process, right? And a lot of smart people who play fantasy baseball use this book and learn from this book. So, Jeff, I will throw it your way so you can kind of maybe go more in depth and tell people what they need to know. What is The Process? Just a general synopsis of what the book is and maybe where people can go to find it.
Yeah, the general synopsis is just what it takes from spring training. I mean, from like spring training or even before that, just collecting the information and how to just run a fantasy baseball team, how to set up an auction values, how during the season, what's the best ways to stream your hitters, stream players. Done a lot of research on looking into that. So for years, we just kept updating a large book, the whole, the process, and kept adding to it and just kind of refining it. When COVID hit, we kind of ran into some issues. And since then, we've only put out an appendix. So we've kept the main one. So if you don't have the main one, you can read it. Nothing's really changed in it. And then every year we add an appendix to it, which is kind of more like a magazine. And then people can go through it and look for the changes that we have with that. The one year we ended up spending so much time like editing the big one and we didn't really spend much time adding studies. So we're just like, oh, let's just do studies. And that's what more people want to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that makes sense, right? Especially where the game is changing year over year. And that'll lead us into our first discussion point. I do want to remind people where you can find the book. It's thefantasybaseballprocess.com, and you could also find it on Amazon. So make sure to check it out. And if you like what you hear today, maybe go out and buy the book as well. So talking about some of the things that change year over year and new things that are being implemented into baseball every year. I want to start with stuff metrics because this is something that's kind of just blown up in not only the baseball world, fantasy baseball world, both of those worlds alike. We see and hear prominent analysts referring to Stuff Plus metrics, and Eno Saris from The Athletic, we know he's kind of at the forefront of that. So what is Stuff Plus exactly? The stat looks at physical characteristics of a pitch, paying attention to release point, velocity, movement, and spin rate. I could be wrong about this. I still feel like we're in the infancy of learning about this metric and its usefulness and how it could correlate to fantasy baseball. With all of that said, you ran some numbers in this book, The Process. What did you learn about Stuff Plus and how predictive is it moving forward?
The one thing that I looked with it was kind of looking at the fantasy stats that we care about, like what's key for us. And the one thing that I found with all of the stuff metrics, the ones I used were the one Saris has, which that's kind of like there's multiple sources. So his were the two at Fangraphs, his and then bot stuff was also there. And I looked at them to see how well they predict the fantasy stats. And the one thing that they do is a really good job predicting ERA. And like they do a good job with that. Where they start breaking down maybe a little bit is with strikeout and walk rate. The keys there is just use strikeout and walk rate. They're more predictive of it than the stuff metrics. But what I found out also was when I looked at different correlations is the good thing that stuff does better than anything else is how they is predicting soft contact. How they just limit hits or limit home runs. And it, like I said, just does an amazing job of pulling out those numbers. In the book, we look at like if you what your 1 month like value was and how predictive it was, and it was just like with ERA, it was all the stuff metrics just blew it away. But what was most surprising is when you get down to it, WHIP is a better predictive factor for future ERA than actual ERA is.
Wow.
So it's like you might just want to stay away from ERA as like looking forward because it just doesn't tell you that much. But I think like, yeah, it was just when I looked at like if you go to like looking at the year to year, what if you have one value 1 year to the next, all of them just kind of point to the bot values or the stuff values predicting this weak contact later. But there was some normal traditional stats, mainly just strikeout rate and walk rate, that do a great job of predicting future. So I think if you can kind of know that those are the ones you should focus on, possibly like Sierra also does a good job, is if you could go through the book, pick out like those 5 and just kind of ignore the rest because it just doesn't really tell you that much predictively.
Mm-hmm. And if people are wondering where they could find Stuff Plus metrics, if you go over to fangraphs.com and you hover over leaders, you go to pitching leaders and then pitch modeling, you can click on Stuff Plus and you can look at each pitcher's Stuff Plus by specific pitch, what that all kind of grades out to, one Stuff Plus metric. And for those wondering, the top 3 qualifying starting pitchers in Stuff Plus last year were Corbin Burns, Dylan Cease, and Tarek Skubal, which makes a lot of sense. Those are 3 of the top 10 or top 12 starting pitchers drafted in ADP right now. One issue, Jeff, that I've run into with Stuff Plus is a lack of uniformity. And I see people citing different Stuff Plus metrics, right? And to be honest, it can be confusing for me. So I can imagine like the consumer, people who are listening to this podcast and reading fantasy baseball articles are trying to figure out which Stuff Plus to use. So that's why I still kind of look at this as like, it's in its infancy and we're learning more about it because Saris might have his Stuff Plus, but then I see someone like, TJ Stats on X who does a great job. I love the content that he puts out, but his Stuff Plus might say that a pitcher is awesome. And then Stuff Plus might say that a pitcher is average. So it's like, how do we use this? We need some kind of uniformity, amongst the Stuff Plus metrics.
That would be the greatest thing ever if they just got together and even put on the same scale, because some of them, they have a stuff of 110 enos. That actually means with enos, that player is 66% better than league average. It's one standard deviation. Another metric, the one Lance Bronkowski uses, that means he's only 10% better than league average.
So yeah, it's very different.
Right. So it's like get them on the same scale would be nice. And then like the bot, which is actually the one I use because after talking to David Appelman I can't remember who wrote it. I can look it up. But he wrote it and it got signed by the Indians. So he's working for them, and it performs great. It was, and a lot of times beat the one that Eno's been working on that hasn't been touched in years. So it stands up good. It just isn't getting the publication that it needs, but it's a great indicator and it's consistent. It stays the same every year. And so you can actually go back and look to see its usefulness, like if there's any trends or stuff with it. I mean, this year, the one with Eno's like, I did all this work, and then here a couple months ago, Eno changed it all. So even some of my numbers might be off. I just wish the people that got it would come together, because I know Baseball America has their own, TJ Stats has their own. There's probably a good 10 of them floating around out there.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's not to be like overly critical or anything. I think there is use for it. And obviously being able to measure which pitchers do quote unquote have better stuff is helpful for fantasy and watching baseball. So it would be nice if we can kind of get together. Jeff, you mentioned some of the other stats that you think that are predictive, right? I know it seems impossible. I wish there was like one metric that would just put everything together and tell us which pitchers are good and which pitchers are bad moving forward, right? It would make life a lot easier, but we don't have those things. If you just had to boil it down to a couple, what would you say are the pitching stats you look at most and the ones that you have found to be the most predictive of future value?
Strikeout minus walk. If I had one stat, that was the only one I would use.
Yep.
It's so, if you just look at the leaderboard, like, oh, those are really good pitchers. And it's so simple. And like everyone's trying to improve upon it. If you can't improve upon it, you just need to kind of stop, like look on, move on. The other one that I like on a shorter time frame, because stuff doesn't stabilize as fast, I like to look at like swinging strike rate and like ball percentage on like individual pitches and maybe like a single start. Because sometimes you just don't get those walks, and it takes a little bit of while for the strikeout minus walk to stabilize. So those are two that I kind of look at maybe on a single start or, a couple starts, just to kind of see if the guy's generating some swing and miss and is throwing the ball across the plate.
All right. Well, let's take a quick break before we do that. Just big thanks to everyone watching us here on YouTube. Make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We are on the road to 30,000 YouTube subscribers. Let's get there by the end of draft season. Let's take a break, and we'll be back right after this.
Who's in? Who's out? Let the madness begin. The NCAA Men's Basketball Championship Selection Show on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
Welcome back in Fantasy Baseball today, joined by special guest Jeff Zimmerman to break down his award-winning book, FSWA award-winning, The Process. So want to take a look at a new Statcast metric that popped up last year and whether or not we can use it for fantasy, the bat speed metrics, right? So this is like Stuff Plus. These metrics, I think, are in their very earliest stage. We only have 1 year of data so far. There are also multiple metrics that you can look at. It's not just one. There's average bat speed, there's fast swing rate, there's squared up percentage, blast percentage, swing length, much more. With that said, you looked into some of these bat speed metrics, and what have you learned so far about it?
My biggest takeaway is first of all, it is just 1 year. We can't even compare 1 year to the next. We're comparing the first half to the second half of the season. So who knows what people do over the offseason, how much this changes. We just don't have any idea. So I think that's one thing to kind of keep in mind. The one thing I did find is bat speed stabilizes really quickly. The actual bat speed that they swing at. So we know this is how hard they're swinging and how hard they're hitting. In there, I have a table where basically to be a reasonable hitter, like a replacement level, you probably have to have 70 miles per hour in your bat speed. And to be like a good hitter, you got to be pushing about 74. So that's where I think that you can kind of see a guy come up and just like, you might have heard like, oh, maybe if it's some prospect, like, does he have newfound power. It might be some younger guy that you're looking at that way, where it's like, oh, did he finally grow into his body and he's got some bat speed that really might not be showing up in the data because it's such a small sample of him coming up. So I think that was one thing, is just kind of setting those ones of like, if he comes up having that 70 miles an hour minimum, and then for like to be a really good hitter, 74. And then the other thing I looked at is, of the ones that are like low, like there are some guys that make it under 70 miles an hour, but the key with them is they make so much contact. So I think to be a useful hitter and have under 70 bat speed, they almost have to have a strikeout rate of around like 17%. So I think I just kind of some of these thresholds you can look at. So it's like, oh, they're not swinging very hard and they don't make any contact. Probably not going to be a good major league hitter. So I think that's all I could take out from this year. I'm like, we just don't have enough data, but it just kind of gives a couple thresholds of that. It was kind of like with pitch velocity when it first came out. It's like, well, here's all these ones we don't know for sure, but it's like the guys that are throwing 87 miles an hour probably aren't going to be making it. It's like you can kind of just group them together. So yeah, we'll know more in 3 or 4 years, but not right now.
Yeah. I mean, it is pretty cool that we have the ability to measure this now, right? I mean, we've heard for years, right? Like, look at the bat speed on this prospect or this young player, right? Like saying that he has bat speed. Now we could actually measure it, right? Same thing as, oh, that guy barreled that ball up. Well, now we actually know if someone barreled up a ball or not. So it actually is, I know for a lot of people, it's kind of intimidating to learn about new metrics and why do we need to measure these things? I mean, part of it is confirmation bias, right? Like, we could see that someone has good bat speed or that they barreled it up, but now we could actually measure those things. So it's pretty cool to actually be able to put some numbers on that. Just for the sake of numbers, the top 5 in average bat speed last season: Giancarlo Stanton, O'Neal Cruz, Kyle Schwarber, Aaron Judge, Joe Adele. Not really surprising there, Jeff. I mean, it's a lot of guys that we know have big power, but maybe with the exception of Aaron Judge, some pretty big holes in their swing as well. So, and on the back end of that, the bottom 5 in average bat speed, it's the complete opposite. It's Luis Arraez, Nicky Lopez, Steven Kwan, Justin Turner, and Nolan Schanuel. So those are guys more likely to make contact, hit to all fields, line drive hitters. Maybe they can wait for the ball to travel a little bit and just kind of take it wherever it's pitched, things like that. So, I mean, that's just kind of a pretty obvious correlation, I guess. Like, yeah, you swing the bat harder, you're probably going to hit for more power, and vice versa so far.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. Yeah. If you have to, if you just don't have that speed, you're just going to have to make that contact and put it into play, kind of be slower through the zone and go with that way. But you can also kind of notice like some of those guys down there, like Justin Turner is like, doesn't have that much bat speed and still had kind of some contact issues. So those are the ones that you might just have a really problem kind of getting a reasonable batting average with.
Yeah. Well, you know what? That might be, Jeff. That's called age. Justin Turner, he's old. He's getting old. So, yeah, we're seeing the bat slow down a little bit and maybe some contact issues there as well.
Yeah, and that's one thing I would love to know. Like, we'll probably have some this next year, but it's like we can't even create an aging curve for him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that'd be nice. Like, in 3 or 4 years, you'd be like, oh, you can figure out how much they age. And we have no idea right now.
Yeah, that is interesting, actually. Yeah, you could track bat speed over time and see. Someone that comes to mind would be interesting to see is Paul Goldschmidt, because, his contact skills and strikeouts have gotten worse over the past couple of years. And it makes sense. I mean, he's only getting older, right? So it'd be interesting to see, like, over time, how someone's bat speed kind of slows down as they start to climb up there in age. Something else in the process is your starting pitcher injury grade. So I've heard these referenced. I know that they were a part of Eno Sarris's starting pitcher rankings last season. I don't know if they are this year. Maybe you could correct me. But what goes into your injury grades and where can people find them?
So you can, I go over some of the background, look back at last year's and kind of look to see where I can improve. I think I did decent going through them. I really hit like the top guys and then went down a little bit. The one thing that I implemented was I called it the Tariq Skubal rule, where if a guy comes I looked at like their previous season innings, but it's a bigger deal if they threw those innings in the second half than the first half. So like they ended the season healthy. If you threw 80 innings in the first half and then in the second half, it's likely that you were hurt. So that was one of the big changes I made this year. The factors I look at is age. That's actually important. It's just as they get older, it's going to happen. Fastball velocity, it's a factor. It's not a big one, but it did improve the odds. So it's there. I think a lot of people, I include it and I keep hearing it get referenced, but it's not a huge factor. The biggest two factors are the innings they threw in the first and second half and the innings they threw 2 seasons ago. Those are the factors. If you were healthy for 2 seasons, your best odds are. The other ones I looked at are their career IL days. The IL from the last couple seasons, and then the total arm injuries. Like a lot of people will have injuries, but it's like they took a ball off their kneecap or something like that. So I wanted to just concentrate on those arm ones. And they're, again, like velocity, they're a factor, but not a great one. So yeah, it comes out that I looked at it like historically, like Madison Bumgarner, like just destroyed it. He was just through so many innings at like such a low velocity and just never got hurt. So he was always like the epitome of like the super healthy guy. But it was this year, like Logan Webb take the top spot. He just doesn't throw hard. Just been throwing year after year. So if he hadn't had like an IL stint earlier on in his career, he probably would have had a top score, like probably broken the 100 grade.
Yeah. So some other names with the A health grades, Logan Webb, Logan Gilbert, Corbin Burns, George Kirby, and then some who had F health grades. No surprise, but Jacob deGrom is at the top of that list. Robbie Ray, Tyler Mahle, Lance McCullers Jr. So I think a lot of those make sense. And the Robbie Ray one is, maybe this is a good reminder that, he hasn't been a model of health, although we are getting excited here in spring because he's throwing this new changeup he learned from Tarek Skubal, but just keep in mind, might be a little bit harder to project innings moving forward for someone like Robbie Ray. Something else you have in your book here about injury grades is spring training innings. And you wrote that they matter a ton. And if a starter doesn't throw over 10 innings, or preferably 15 in spring training, that they should be dropped a letter grade. So why is that? Why is it that spring training innings actually matter for health grades?
Just looking back at it, it's like if they're not throwing, and the one thing that I looked at was trying to find that like some of these guys were like, oh, they were healthy, but they're thrown on the backfields. But if they were thrown on the backfields, they were probably being monitored really close. Like the team didn't trust them to go out, they didn't want to make sure anything, like they weren't ready for the season. So it's something like when I published it, I don't know the innings. We still don't know the innings. Like there's a couple guys we can put zeros on because like Mania, it's like he's not going to do that. But right now we don't know. But this is a case where when I looked at it historically, is a major factor. We just, at this point, like when it has to go to publication for everyone, we just don't know it. So just keep an eye on it. And it's kind of, like I said, it's key that it's the innings in the actual spring training games, not the innings like, oh, they're thrown on the backfield for, we don't even know how much.
Yep. And obviously people can find your injury grades in the process. Is there anywhere else they could find them? I know last year they were in Eno Saris' starting pitcher rankings.
Yeah,
there again, or
they're in there again. He wanted them. I created them like as the letter grade, so it kind of worked out that way, and it has the percentile. So 100 would probably be the most healthy, and 0 was F, like way down there. I don't know how we're going to get any lower than DeGrom, but it's maybe a 40-year-old. And
yeah,
I'm not sure.
Jeff, what do you make of Jacob deGrom's ADP this year? I just want to bring it up and get your thoughts because, like, I understand the upside, but the fact that he's coming back from a second Tommy John surgery, he threw like 20 innings last year, and he's being drafted as like a top 12, top 15 starter inside the top 50 picks. It seems insane to me. What do you think?
I have Strider ranked ahead of him. And Strider's going way later. I'm not for sure what it is right now, but at least in the NFBC, I think he's going to throw more innings, Strider is, and I think that they could come out and have the same talent. So I think there was some early drafts that people linked onto, and it just hasn't moved. And it's one of those instances. And also, it takes one person in a draft to take him early. It would be interesting to be like, actually see people's rankings of him and see like where he stands in everyone else's. But like I said, it just takes one person sits there and gives him what he did a few seasons ago and just gives him those numbers over like 120 innings. Like, yep, he's going to be it, really good, but I'm not sure I'm going to be the one to do it. Like, he hasn't broken 92 innings. I think that has to be what you give him as a projection, and no one else is there. Looks like Zips is not liking him. They're at Fangraphs at 51 innings, which I can kind of understand, but it was like I think you max out at 92, and I don't think a lot of people are going to do that. So I don't like it. Like I said, I'll take Strider every day over him.
Yeah, so DeGrom hasn't thrown 100 innings since 2019. I mean, that's just so long ago. And people are, maybe part of the logic drafting him this high is they see what he did in a partial season in 2021 with a 108 ERA. And it's like, is DeGrom that same pitcher still? I don't know. He's coming back from his second Tommy John surgery. And, looking at steamer projections, they seem to be a little bit more injury agnostic than every other projection system. They have him for 26 starts and 152 innings. It just seems really, really optimistic for Jacob DeGrom. His ADP the past 2 weeks over at NFBC, 52.9 as the SP, it looks like 12. Yeah, SP 12 off the board right behind George Kirby and just ahead of Blake Snell. And I shout out to Scott White. I know he's been making the same case you just made. It's, why are you taking Jacob DeGrom top 60 when you can get Spencer Strider, 75 picks later or whatever it might be? So, yeah, really good point there. Let's take our final break. When we return, we'll get to some other questions for Jeff Zimmerman. We'll do that right after this.
One of golf's elite courses, Quail Hollow, hosts the game's top players at the PGA Championship this May on CBS.
Welcome back in Fantasy Baseball. Today, we're joined by special guest Jeff Zimmerman. And moving a little bit away from your book, The Process, you do a lot of other things, Jeff. I want to touch on some of those things as well. You wrote an article about new ballparks this season, and it is a big talking point this offseason for good reason. The Athletics are moving from Oakland to Sacramento. The Rays are playing in George M. Steinbrenner Field in Tampa Bay. And the Orioles have moved their left field fence in Camden Yards to mitigate what they did 3-4 years ago. They pushed the fences back 30 feet, right? So now they're kind of meeting at a happy medium, moving those fences back in a little bit. What did you learn looking into this thing? Are projections accounting for these moves? What did you find with these 3 ballpark moves in particular?
I think all but one was. Clay Davenport may not have been. I actually asked all the creators of them, and they all got back to me that they're taking them all into account. One of them kind of forgot about one, so they were going to get to it, but I kind of believe that they were. They just they forgot about Baltimore moving the wall in, so they were going to go look into that. But as a whole, I think they're already accounted for. I think the key here is, like, if you're using projections, find out if they are, which most likely they are, and you don't give them another boost. I'm kind of worried some people are going to give them a boost, like a double boost. Like, they've already gotten the boost with projections, and then they're going to get a little bit more. I think the key with all of these is that you're going to – the hitters move across or up in all of them, and the pitching is going to go down across the – for each of these 3 parks. So I think that's kind of the key that you kind of have to consider.
Are there any names in particular that you find yourself gravitating towards that you think can maybe take even more advantage of some of these moves, right? For the Orioles, in your article, you pointed out Adley Rutschman, who is a switch hitter, but obviously will bat righty in Camden Yards at times. They brought in Tyler O'Neill. There's Ryan Mountcastle. There's Jordan Westberg. In Tampa Bay, there's Brandon Lau. There's Josh Lowe, Jonathan Aranda. For the Athletics, Lawrence Butler, big hype breakout candidate this year. Brent Rooker, Zach Geloff, Shea Langoliers. Are there any of those names or any other names that you have found yourself gravitating towards?
The only ones I think how do I want to put this? I really think they did a good job of figuring it out. If I was taking a target one, it'd be the Tampa Bay guys to see if they can take advantage of that short porch. Low and Lau would be the two I would kind of look into. But otherwise, it's like it's taken into account all the athletics. It's going to kind of be across the board. It's just they're not playing in like the biggest stadium there ever was with, and this huge foul territory, so they can at least I'd like to see what their batting average kind of goes up to, where they're not fouling out so much. The athletics will be, but those are the ones. The other one might be Ryan Mountcastle. There's been a lot of layovers with him, like, oh, he would have had this many more. Possibly. I mean, it could work out that way, but he's one that I'm not afraid of anymore. I think a lot of people before, and I don't think he's I think he got anchored really low early in draft season and just hasn't moved up to where he belongs.
Mm-hmm. What about on the flip side, Jeff? Are you fading pitchers, right? Because again, that's kind of the complete inverse of what's happening here. And for me, the Tampa Bay ones, again, kind of stand out because playing in the heat and humidity, being a fly ball pitcher, which a lot of their pitchers are, Ryan Pepio, Taj Bradley, Shane Baz, they all lean fly ball tendency. And especially in Taj Bradley's case, he gives up a lot of hard contact. So just worries me a little bit more. What do you think about the pitchers in some of these parks?
The one thing at Tampa I'm worried a little bit is I don't know how the weather is going to play out. Yep. Like the storms and when that's going to hit. Are they playing in the heat of the afternoon before those late afternoon ones? Or are we waiting to play really late at night? I just don't know. Like, oh, is a guy just going to throw 3 innings and not? I really don't want to count on any of the Tampa pitchers. Like, I don't want him to be any of my core ones. If it's someone I have to drop later, it's no big deal, but I don't want him to be a core pitcher. For the Athletics, they're going to a park that's going to be the equivalent of about what Minnesota or Kansas City play in for elevation, heat, and so forth. So it's, like I said, it's not Oakland, but it's still not some crazy hitter's park.
Yeah, it's not Cincinnati or anything.
Right. Everyone's like, they're going to a better park. It was just like they were in the worst park, and now they're going to just like a middle-of-the-road park. So I think with them, I'm not too worried about the pitchers otherwise. Like, you're not worried about pitchers in Kansas City or Minnesota doing it. It's like with the heat and everything, it should be similar with that. With Baltimore, I think it's more with the hitters I'm worried about, because it's like, I want to concentrate more on them because it's just going to be a few hitters on the other team going to get some home runs. I think you'll see some increases, but I think it's going to be more with them. It's going to be that targeted group of those right-handed bats now being able to hit some home runs.
Yep. We spoke earlier about some health grades and maybe some things that go into, giving out those health grades. And obviously innings are a huge proponent of that. And I wanted to ask you if you've done any studies or anything you've learned about innings jumps, right? And like, we have data from years past, right? And I think it's a really big talking point this year because a lot of the high-end pitchers have made really big jumps from 2023 to 2024. So Tarek Skubal, Garrett Crochet, Cole Reagans, Michael King, Spencer Schwellenbach, Ronaldo Lopez, Luis Heel. And I think as we start to see more relievers transition into starters, we keep having this conversation, right? Like, are these pitchers going to be more prone to injury the following year, which for a lot of those guys will be this year, 2025, because they made the big jump from 23 to 24. Jeff, what do you have on innings jumps?
A lot of them can handle it. It's one of those deals, like, I'm not worried about it. The one thing I have put down is Seth Lugo is recently, there's some crazy guys in like the 1910s. He went from like being just the reliever to a starter. His 146 innings was the most any starter ever threw. So that's where I'm kind of maxing Clay Holmes's innings at. Like, that's the most anyone's ever done. And most of them are less than that. Like I said, all of them are less than that. Mm-hmm. So I think that's one thing just to take into account is knowing those guys making that move, you might cap them out at 150 innings, but probably even like 140. Just like looking at historical numbers, that's how many innings that they ended up throwing. They weren't able to, for various reasons, just haven't been able to go that long. For the young guys, you can almost have a 50 innings jump. There's no problems with it. it's just like that's how it goes. I know that kind of have been some other studies on it, but I haven't found any issues with pitchers making that one. I think it's the biggest one is as long as they're probably going between like 80 to 100 innings on their start and getting the at least like 4 to 5 days rest. I don't have a problem with how the pitcher's making it. I think they're being babied a little too much, and you can kind of see some teams pushing it with their starters.
Yeah. And I've asked Nick Pollock that exact question, and he's given me a similar answer that once a pitcher shows that they can handle that workload and they can go every 5 days and, they can throw 80, 90, 100 pitches consistently, then, he pretty much buys in and thinks that a pitcher is capable of doing that. I mean, I think Garrett Crochet is just such a unique example because he dealt with so many injuries in the past. And then last year got all the way up to like the 130, 140 innings. The problem was in the second half, and maybe it's not a problem, but they didn't let him throw more than 4 innings in any start from July on. So do we know if he can handle a full starter's workload? We don't. Like, the skills on a per inning basis are amazing, but how do we know that he can just be an ace now, right? And handle like 175 plus innings?
We don't. That's kind of the issue with him. It's like you haven't seen him do it. Did they even push him to like over 90 pitches in an inning? I was kind of looking that up here. Like he never threw over 72 pitches. Oh, wait. No, he did go over 100 a few times. He did push it there in June.
He threw 102 on June 13th. He got
on
up to
June 1st. He did 103. But it was like he just really wasn't like the workhorse. And then toward the end, it's just like they weren't letting him throw it all. And after those, they just kind of worked him down and never went over like 74 on July 23rd. And then it was like never over 60 from then on. So we don't know if he can. I think they wanted him to look good, the White Sox, to be able to get a decent trade off of it. But he's one where like you don't know because he hasn't done it. And kind of like the issue is like you hope he can go long enough in those starts to get you the win because he's just throwing that much. But I kind of think the Red Sox are going to try to push him and see if they can get his numbers up. But who knows if that'll actually work or not. Like, we'll see. We just haven't seen it. Like, I think that's kind of the key is you want to see him do it. It's Logan Gilbert, they kind of had some issues with, and now he's just like, he just goes out and just shoves every time.
Yeah. Garrett Crochet, just such a unique example too. And I get why the White Sox did what they did. They were trying to protect their investment so that they could trade him in the offseason, but did get up to 146 innings last season. Just doing some simple math, like jumping from 146 up to 170 or 175 feels like it would make sense. But for someone like Crochet, who's so unique, it is a little bit tougher to say. Did just want to get some quick thoughts on some other relievers turned starter this year. Because again, this has been a revelation in fantasy and baseball the past couple of years. We've seen so many pitchers make this jump. Crochet just last year. Ronaldo Lopez was awesome doing it as well. Seth Lugo a couple of years ago. Clay Holmes has looked great so far in the spring. Grant Holmes is someone who everybody has as like a deep sleeper this season. So what do you think about that next crop, these guys that are going reliever turned starter heading into 2025?
Clay Holmes was the one where I was talking about with Lugo, where it's like, I think he has the pieces to do it. The one thing to kind of keep track of is to see if their velocity throughout the season kind of stays up. That's kind of always one issue. I mean, out of all the success stories, we still had the AJ Puck failure. We still had Jordan Hicks, where he couldn't make it the full season, wasn't able to do it. They're going to give him another shot at it this year. So there's some pitchers don't make it. I think Clay Holmes is one that where he's going, it's definitely I would take a chance on. And Grant Holmes is definitely one where I think across the board, everyone has him as their sleeper, looking at what he did late. I mean, I think kind of the key with him is he's out of options. So he's got the Braves have kind of either got to keep him in in the rotation or in the bullpen, or they just got to release him and someone's going to pick him up after the season he had last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Clay Holmes the past 2 weeks, the ADP 274. Grant Holmes going just outside the top 300. And Scott has made this point about Grant Holmes. He is out of options. So is Ian Anderson. So those two are in the rotation to start the year, we think. And then once Spencer Strider is back, presumably, if no one else gets hurt in the meantime, one of those guys will have to be booted from the rotation. So I think it's whoever performs better between Grant Holmes and Ian Anderson. My money is on Grant Holmes. I'm willing to bet that he will be the better of the two there. And then maybe Ian Anderson either is moved to the bullpen or maybe, dropped off or traded away to another team. Jeff, you are also the author of Mining the News on Fangraphs. This is a very, very useful article where you dive in around the internet, you dig in, you try to find tidbits that can apply to fantasy. So again, it's very useful and I would highly recommend people check it out. Let's do a little spring training buy or sell. So looking back at, the past week's worth of Mining the News, one that kind of went under the radar, I haven't really seen other people talking about this. Ohtani still feels some limitations at the plate with his range of motion in that shoulder following off-season surgery. So I think he's a confounding player this year. He just went 50-50. He was far and away the best player in fantasy. He's just setting records. He was amazing. But now he's trying to rehab as a pitcher, and he also is coming back from off-season shoulder surgery. So buy or sell Ohtani should be the number one overall pick.
I think it's a 50-50 shot at this point. I think if he was feeling 100%, he is the number one pick. Like, I don't think that there's anything. I think just this little bit, if you kind of give him a little bit of a ding on the shoulder surgery and bring it down, he could not be, his value could get closer to Witt. And then also he's talked about not stealing as much. So that's one where it's like, I don't know. That's always the one, like, is he really not going to steal or not? I mean, it's kind of one that, like, you don't know for sure if that's going to be the case. But I think it's a little bit closer now. The one thing you may want to do is, if you have like the choice on the top, is maybe just split the two. I mean, it's not bad to have Witt in one league and Ohtani in another.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, you have to split it around. I may not put all my all my eggs just with Ohtani, but last year would have been the season to do it when he just freaking carried teams to championships. I know he won me plenty of money.
Mm-hmm. Jeff, you have the first overall pick in your only draft this year. Who are you taking, Ohtani or Bobby Witt?
I'm probably still going to go with Ohtani.
Yeah.
My only league. Yeah, it'd probably be Ohtani, but I could be talked in otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, the upside is so massive.
Well, the deal is I've had 3 number 2 picks so far this year. I've not ever in all my years at the NFBC in a draft. In the auctions, I've had number 1s. I don't know why that is, but in my drafts, I've never had the number 1 pick. But I've had number 2, so I already have like 3 Wits already.
Okay. So in all those drafts, Ohtani went first overall?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Fair enough. The Orioles plan to be more aggressive on the base paths this season. Jeff, buy or sell? What do you think?
I'm going to buy it. I think they have the speed. I don't know why they have so many fast young guys. It's like, just go with it. And they seem to be playing like station to station and not making teams aggressive. I think that's like one of their advantages is having this young team. And just go out there and just put the pressure on the other pitchers and just go after them. I buy that they're going to try it. I think they really want to get Mateo back. I think that could be huge for them and just get him out there running. But it might be a bit before he comes back. But with Mullins, all these guys are young. They've got good sprint speed scores. Just let them go.
Yeah, so last season, the Orioles were tied for 18th in baseball in stolen bases. We know Gunnar Henderson obviously is fast enough. Jordan Westberg, 91st percentile sprint speed. So the hope there with him is he starts to run a little bit more. We did see Gunnar Henderson from his first year to his second year start to be more aggressive. So hopefully that happens with Westberg, Gunnar Henderson, Jackson Holiday, assuming he could actually make contact and get on base. Yeah, I think we could see all those guys be a little bit more aggressive this season. What about Mason Wynn? He says that he wants to steal 30 bags this season. Buy or sell?
I buy that he wants to. It's the
Yeah.
Cardinals, and they never let anyone really, like, they sort of have, but they kind of hold guys back. I think, like, if he's leading off, just let him go. Like, he's been generally successful, so he's stolen over 30 bags in the minors multiple seasons, so 43 back in 2022 before he came in. So I don't see why there's a reason. I think it might be something with the manager. So if he wants to, I think so, but I'm a little bit doubtful if the team will always give him that light.
Yeah, I hope there was a little bit of change in team philosophy here. I know that they're going through a change, and Chaim Bloom is going to take over next year, the Cardinals kind of front office and all those types of things. But Mason Wynn, he's fast enough. He stole a bunch of bases in the minors. He did it with good success rates. He makes good contact. He gets on base. I know Chris Towers has made the Tim Anderson comp. I think it's a really good one. I think Mason Wynn, maybe not this year, but over the next couple of years can develop into a player like that. So I think he can get close to 30 bags this upcoming season. I think 25 to 30, I think is maybe what I would expect there from Mason Wynn. The Angels apparently say Christian Moore could contribute this upcoming season. So he was their first round pick last year. He got some run in the minors, and he made some noise, hit some big, loud home runs, also strikes out quite a bit. Jeff, buy or sell that Angels prospect Christian Moore can contribute this season?
Everything I keep reading from the owner to the manager all love him, and they feel he's going to contribute. That's also, that team is kind of banged up to start with, and they're not really like healthy after it. Like, you got Yohan Moncada at third base. Like, we heard Fangraphs, we have him for 309 plate appearances, 399. I'll take the under on that one.
Yeah.
Zach Neto's already hurt at shortstop. So, I mean, is Tim Anderson going to go there? Luis Rengifo can play everywhere, but he can't cover three positions. Can't cover second, short, and third. So,
and even Rengifo's coming back from wrist surgery. So
I know. So I think they want him to. I don't know how they want to do, like, control his service time. They just want the extra year and then not get the picks, or how they want to go about that way. But I think there's a good chance he's up. The team wants him up, and there's some holes. It may be like whenever Moncada gets hurt for the first of 5 times, they bring him in. But I think there's a good chance we see him this year. I drafted him in a few places, just seeing the writing on the wall and just the lack of infield talent on the team.
Yeah, and there has been some buzz that he could even be there on opening day. I don't buy that. I know the Angels are really aggressive with their prospects, but just drafted last year, I think he needs a little bit more seasoning. And if you think about the long-term picture for the Angels, I think having another year of service time for Christian Moore makes more sense than them just trying to keep him on the roster all year and go for a draft pick if he were to finish top 3 in AL Rookie of the Year voting, which, as of now seems like a long shot, but, crazier things have happened in baseball. Let's talk about Evan Carter, who believes his back issue is fixed. He had off-season surgery and is trying to regain his old swing. Jeff, are you buying that Evan Carter is healthy? Maybe a sleeper. I mean, he's going outside like the top 250 picks.
Yeah. I think the problem with Carter is, like, even if he is healthy, he's just kind of a platoon bat anyway. Like, it's not that many plate appearances, but he has a career -34 once created plus against lefties.
Oof.
It's just, it's a 231 OPS.
Yep.
So you're hoping he's healthy, and it's probably just going to be against, right-handed pitchers. So I'll let someone else take that chance. I know he says he's healthy. I'd rather see it for a whole season. A lot of these guys, you'll even hear it afterwards, like, yeah, I wasn't 100% right. I was kind of dealing with it. I was good enough to play, but not, back to my full self. But he's kind of got those he still could be hurt, and he's just a platoon bat. And I would prefer not starting the season with a platoon bat. I know outfield is just, it gets horrendous. We were talking on the Launch Angle pod. We kind of started getting into the platoon bats like the Alec Burlesons of the world and the Jesus Sanchez's. It's like they're platoon bats. They're only going to play, 75% of the time, but then they're just you don't have any other options right now.
Yeah.
So I there's a place to draft Evan Carter, but I just haven't gotten any of my drafts had him get to the top where I'm ended up picking him.
All right, the last name here on the list is Bryson Stott. He says that he was dealing with a nerve issue in his right elbow last season, and this goes back to what you were just talking about, Jeff, where Bryson Stott was playing through something, and maybe that's the reason why the numbers were down. He said first discovered it in May and just kind of played with it from then on. He's another name that could be a platoon bat this upcoming season. Buy or sell the bounce back on Bryson Stott.
God, if you need those steals, it's you draft early, like all power, you can you got to love kind of some of those steal options that 30 plus steals that he'll probably provide. I kind of buy it, but I think it's more build orientated. The deal is if anything, I'm going to grab power and batting average, really just power earlier on, because I feel like I can sort of find some speed and I can find batting average later, but I just can't find power. So this is just one person where it's kind of like the numbers work that he should be going as early as he is in drafts, but it's also someone that I'm going to try not to target unless I've really just like I don't know. The deal is he goes so early, you don't know if you have an all power team and you need those stolen bases. You kind of have to take him and then start filling in power after him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually just took him in a DC that I'm in, and then my very next pick was Jorge Soler. So it's like, did exactly what you said. Took Bryson Stott for some speed there, but then followed it up with some power with a Jorge Soler. And doing a DC right now, it's speed kind of dries up a little bit. So Bryson Stott is someone that I was looking at. Andres Jimenez, names like that. So hopefully can bounce back. Do you think he's an everyday player, Jeff, Bryson Stott, or do you think they go back to platooning him this season? Because he was an everyday player 2 years ago, and then out of nowhere, they started platooning him last season. Maybe it's because he was kind of banged up. I don't know.
Yeah, looking at his career numbers, they're almost identical.
Yeah, like he's not bad against lefties. It's weird.
Yeah, he's like over his career, he's better than against lefties than he is righties. But he's also like a below average hitter. So that might be one thing. Like his career OPS is under 700 for against righties and lefties. So it might just be someone who's better than that. Like that's kind of a one thing. It's like he may not be bad, but someone can just be better, and they can kind of improve on that. So I guess it is some worry about it that he just ends up not playing as much.
All right. Well, he is Jeff Zimmerman here today on the show, co-author of the award-winning book, The Process. Make sure to go check it out. The fantasy baseball process.com. You can also find the book on Amazon. Jeff, thanks so much for coming on, and be sure to let everyone know where they can find your work.
Yeah, I'm writing at Fangraphs from now till the end of the season. We're back on doing the Launch Angle pod once a week. Me and the Robs are doing that, Rob Silver and Rob Pietro. And then, then of course the process, it's go out and buy it. Like I said, there's definitely something to learn, and especially since we've had the new writers, I've learned something too, since I'm not the ones actually doing it. So it's just the questions we had and people went through and try to answer them the best they could. And it's definitely illuminating.
Yeah. And there's so much more than even we just covered today. I mean, there's discussions about what to do in season. There's fab discussions and player projections and how to project players and what goes into that and all different kinds of metrics and tables and formulas. And so it definitely is worth checking out. We are going to wrap there. For Jeff, I am Frank. Thanks as always for tuning in to Fantasy Baseball Today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. And we will be back again next week. Bye-bye.